Two Irishmen, Seamus and Declan, were lost at sea in a lifeboat. After hours drifting, Seamus found an old lamp and gave it a rub. Out popped a genie. "I'll grant you one wish," the genie said. Before Declan could even think, Seamus jumped up and shouted, "Turn the entire ocean into Guinness." The genie nodded, waved his hand, and vanished. Declan stared at him in disbelief and said, "Seamus, you fool. Now we have to pee in the boat." A wealthy Arab needed heart surgery, but first the doctors had to find someone with his rare blood type. A man named Angus stepped forward and gladly donated. After the surgery, the Arab showed his gratitude in a big way. Angus received a brand new BMW, a Rolex, and $50,000 in cash. A few months later, the Arab needed another operation, so Angus donated again. This time, he got a thank you card and a box of chocolates. Confused, Angus called him and said, "Last time you gave me a car, a watch, and cash. Now just a card and sweets." The sheik laughed and replied, "Well, I've got a bit of your blood in me now." A man goes to hell. The devil greets him and says, "You have to pick your torture. Pick wisely because this will be your torture for eternity." The man goes through hundreds of rooms but can't decide, until he sees a room where a man is sitting on a couch, watching football on TV, and getting a blowjob from a cheerleader. The man says, "This is what I want to do for eternity." The devil says, "Are you sure?" The man screams, "Hell yes." The devil goes up to the cheerleader and says, "You can stop now. I found someone to replace you." A man was brought into the hospital's intensive care ward and put in a bed, with tubes coming out everywhere. A week later, another man was admitted in a similar condition. Both lay there, machines pinging, tubes poking, etc., for a couple more weeks before one of them had the strength to raise his hand and point to himself and say American. The other patient signaled he had heard, raised his own hand, and said Canadian. This act tired them out so badly, it was a week before the first summoned up the strength to say New York. Other replied in a weak, frail voice, Toronto. Once more, the strain was too much for them both, and they passed out. Days passed before the first patient managed to again point to himself and say, Michael. Replied the other, David. A few hours later, Michael managed to point to himself again and rasp out weakly, Cancer. David responded, Sagittarius. An old cowboy walks into a barber shop in Montana for a shave and a haircut that he asked the barber, Please take a good look at my face. You would see that I have hollow cheeks. He replied, Yes, I can see from this far. They are quite prominent. The old man, no matter how hard I try, I never get a close shave. The bristle in my hollow cheeks always gave me a feeling that it was an incomplete shave. Barber replied, Don't worry, sir. I'll give you the cleanest shave you've ever had. The old man sat down in a chair. The barber, after lathering his face, gave him a small wooden ball and told him to put it in his mouth. When Barber was shaving the right side of the face, he told him to move the ball towards his right cheek. He continued to shave. After some time, he said, Now move the ball towards your left cheek. The whole process continued until the shaving was completed. Barber moved his hand all over the face of the old man. He seemed quite happy and satisfied and told him he could take out the ball from his mouth. The old man, to check his shave, moved his hand all over his face and expressed satisfaction. He returned the wooden ball to the barber and gave him a generous tip. As the old man was leaving, he casually inquired, I'm just curious if someone accidentally swallowed the ball. What would you do? He responded with a subtle smile, Sir, don't worry. Such things do happen quite often, but they returned the ball the next day. The ball that you have used today was returned to me last evening. A police officer had a perfect hiding place for watching for speeders along a well-traveled stretch of highway. The location, at a bend in the road, allowed him to hide his car out of sight of oncoming traffic while setting up his radar to nab any speeders who passed by. He had used this location successfully a number of times, especially on holidays, and decided to use it again one Labor Day weekend. The officer arrived at his hiding place and set himself up, settling down to wait for the first speeders to appear. After a half hour or so, the officer hadn't seen anybody speeding. In fact, most of the cars that passed him were traveling exactly at the speed limit, and some of the passengers in the passing cars were even smiling and waving at him. He couldn't believe this was happening since his hiding place was so well concealed. Finally, after realizing that virtually all the passing cars knew he was there, the officer decided that something was wrong and went to investigate. He got out of his car and walked up the road a short distance. About 100 yards before his hiding place, the officer found a problem. A 10-year-old boy was standing on the side of the road with a huge hand-painted sign that said radar trap ahead. A little more investigative work led the officer to the boy's accomplice. Another boy about 100 yards beyond the radar trap with a sign reading tips and a bucket at his feet full of change. A little girl asked her mom, "Mom, may I take the dog for a walk around the block?" Mom replies, "No, because she isn't hot." "What's that mean?" asked the child. "Go ask your father. I think he's in the garage." The little girl goes to the garage and says, "Dad, may I take Belle for a walk around the block?" "I asked Mom, but she said the dog was in heat and to come to you." Dad said, "Bring Belle over here." Being old school, he took a rag, soaked it with a little gasoline, and dabbed the dog's backside with it to disguise the scent, and said, "Okay, you can go now, but keep Belle on a leash and only go one time around the block." The little girl left and returned a few minutes later with no dog on the leash. Surprised, Dad asked, "Where's Belle?" "You're gonna love this." The little girl said she ran out of gas about halfway down the block, so another dog is pushing her home. On a dark and rainy day, there's nothing quite like curling up on the couch with cozy, warm blankets. That's also my favorite time to read jokes and funny stories. They never fail to cheer me up and make up for the gray weather outside. I found this story earlier today. When I read it, my husband could hear my laughter all the way from the bedroom. I hope it will cheer you up as well. Mrs. Anderson was teaching a third-grade class at a Minnesota school. They were discussing the future, what it meant to be an adult, and what responsibilities they would have as they grew older. Mrs. Anderson then asked her students what they wanted to be when they grew up. She was hoping for answers like teacher, doctor, police officer, and firefighter. Little Johnny eagerly raised his hand, and the teacher nodded to him to speak. Little Johnny said, "I want to be a billionaire. I want to go to the most expensive clubs, take the best bitch with me, and give her a Ferrari worth over $1 million. I want an apartment in Hawaii, a mansion in Paris, an infinite Visa card, and a private jet so that I can go with her wherever we want to and make love to her 3 times a day." "Happy," replied Mrs. Anderson was taken aback and completely lost for words. She was absolutely furious with Johnny over what he had said and didn't want the other kids listening to him and taking after him. She thought that confronting him would only make him and his words cooler in his classmates' eyes. Instead, she decided to ignore him.